Let's see, do I get the slides going? Okay. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. An incredible lineup of speakers, of people that have not only improved the world for all of us in the past, but also in the future. So it's a real honor to be here. I'm the president of Sierra Sciences, a basic research company looking at solving the aging process, and I'm also the chairman of the Institute of Advanced Telomere Medicine in Tokyo, which, as you'll learn, is actually one of the most important places, second to South Korea, in terms of trying to solve the aging process. Thank you. And the slide didn't advance. Somebody want to make this work? It's already on. Let's check it. It's not working. Okay, so my slides aren't advancing. So I was hoping the clock would stop ticking.
Okay, works right.
Okay. So what I'm going to be talking about today is first a clock that ticks inside every dividing cell of our body that appears to actually play a role in controlling the aging process. And it ticks even if you have the healthiest lifestyle, eat the right foods, exercise all the time, and do everything your doctors tell you to do. This clock, if you have the perfect genetics and lead the perfect lifestyle, this clock that ticks inside all of us still limits our lifespan to a maximum of 125 years. So I'll be talking about that clock today. And I'll also be talking about, now it's going backward. Okay, so I'll also be talking about how research that we are doing to reverse this clock that's affecting both aging and our declining health. So I want to make it clear, we're not just talking about aging, we're also talking about making us healthier and reverse declining health. So now, a lot of us believe that aging is something that we all do gracefully. But that's not true. There's a lot of us living in assisted living homes and hospices because we can no longer take care of ourselves. And these people are miserable, they're unhappy, they're depressed. And this problem is going to get a lot worse because the world is faced with something called the silver tsunami. And the countries that are going to be hit hardest by this are Japan, South Korea, and China. And what this is that by 2030, the year 2030, 30% of the population is going to be over 65. And then by 2050, 40% of the population of Japan, and South Korea is going to be very close to this, 40% of the population will be over 65 years old. And what makes this even worse is that for every person that will be over 65, there will only be about one person in the workforce. So who's going to take care of these people? This is a big problem. Now, you'll see that if you can see the small print, you'll see that South Korea is number 2 and China is number 3. But this is worldwide. It's just going to be hardest hit here. So the question is, who's going to take care of these people? And how is the government going to be able to afford all the expenses of taking care of these type of people? Well, I want to say one very exciting solution is what you'll be hearing later today when Ben Gertzel and Dave Hansen get up here and talk about robotics. Because I see this as a big, big opportunity to deal with caregiving. We are going to have robots that take care of people. And that's going to be big business because there's going to be so many people that need taken care of. But another solution is let's not let these old people get old. Let's keep them young. Let's keep them healthy, alive, and still in the workforce so they can take care of themselves. So this is the solution that I'm working on trying to solve. So we have to first figure this out. What causes human aging? You've heard a lot of stuff. Some of it may be true, some of it's not. But a lot of people like to think that we are no different from old trucks sitting in a field. That is, we age because of exposure to the sun, the wind, the rain. But if that was true, why is it that people who live in the North and South Poles age at the same rate of people who live on the equator? And why is it that dogs and cats age at different rates from humans when they're in the same environment? I've always believed there had to be some kind of clock that ticks inside of all of us, and this clock is just set differently in dogs and cats and horses. Now another problem is, another thing that we're different from old trucks sitting in a field is, yes, we do get exposed to the weather. When we get sunburned, our cells die, but we have other cells that can divide to replace those cells. Trucks don't. So why do we age if we can have this ability to just constantly repair ourselves? Well, it's been known for a long time that when you take human cells and grow them in a petri dish or even on a person, oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, so my slides are advancing on their own. We find that cells can replace themselves, and whenever a cell divides to become two daughter cells, those daughter cells are identical. So again, why do we age? Well, it was discovered in the 1960s that our cells can't divide indefinitely. This is crazy. They can't divide indefinitely. For some reason, I'm going to have to keep doing this. For some reason, as our cells divide, they lose something. They keep track of their time. This was discovered in 1960s by Leonard Hayflick. It's called the Hayflick Limit. And what Leonard found out was that when you take cells from a 10-year-old and divide them in a petri dish, those cells can divide about 90 times before they stop dividing and level off. When you take cells from a 90-year-old, you find that those cells can only divide 10 times before leveling off. So what's going on here? Somehow our cells know how old they are. There's some counting mechanism that's occurring in our cells, so our cells know how many times they have divided and how many times they have remaining to divide. And I've often thought of this as it's something like ride tickets at an amusement park. You go to the amusement park, you get a bunch of tickets, you know how many rides you get to ride, and after you used up half the tickets, you know you only got half those rides left, and you know you've already ridden on half those rides. So we must have something inside ourselves like ride tickets at an amusement park. And now we know that these ride tickets are found at the very tips of our chromosomes, and they're called telomeres. These things get shorter as our cells divide and we age. Okay, so let's discuss this in a little more detail. Telomeres, I'm proposing, is the clock of aging. And to understand what a telomere is, we need to first zoom in on a human being. And we find that a human is made up of 100 trillion cells. I'd mentioned cells before when I talked about sunburns. We kill these cells and they have to be replaced. They can divide to replace other cells. We're made up of 100 trillion cells. Now, if we zoom in even further, we find that every cell contains a nucleus. And inside these nuclei are found chromosomes. They're where our genes are. They give us our hair color, our eye color. They affect a lot about us. And remember, we're looking to find out what a telomere is. We've got to zoom in even further. And we look at one chromosome here. We see that a chromosome is made up of two arms, a top arm and a bottom arm. And inside of those arms are found the DNA molecule that gives us where our genes are found. This is a long string of beads The beads are called bases, and a typical chromosome is about 100 million bases in length. What we are talking about now is the very tips of these chromosomes, called the telomeres. Think of that long DNA molecule as a shoelace, and the caps on your shoelaces are the same as the telomeres on your chromosomes. And we know that when the caps on our shoelaces get worn away, our shoelaces start to fall apart, and the same thing happens with our chromosomes. So now, a telomere is about 15,000 bases in length, at least when we're first conceived. And here's where all the troubles begin. Every time our cells divide, and each and every time, our telomeres get a little bit shorter. And there's so much cell division from the time we're a newborn embryo to a newborn baby that our telomeres have shortened from 15,000 bases down to 10,000 bases before we're even born. And the problem doesn't stop there. It gets worse. As we keep dividing cells, our telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter eventually. And when our telomeres get down to 5,000 bases, our cells lose the ability to function and we die of old age. This is not a theory anymore. This is a fact. Anybody growing human cells in petri dishes, normal human cells in petri dishes, know that this counting mechanism exists, and the lives of those cells are limited by the length. Again, it's 15,000 when we're conceived, 10,000 when we're born, and 5,000 when we die of old age. And this limits our lifespan to 125 years, no matter how well you eat, no matter how much you exercise, no matter how much you do everything your doctors tell you to do. Okay, so it's not just aging, as I said. Telomeres are also the clock of declining health. Almost every disease you've ever heard of has now been connected to the length of your telomeres. And I want to and I could spend hours going over all these things, but I want to just focus on one example, and that's bedsores. When a person lies in a hospital bed for a long time, their skin gets worn away from the friction with the sheets. Well, that's okay at first because other cells divide to replace that and heal that wound. But after this happens over and over and over again, the telomeres get so short that you can no longer heal those wounds, and that's what causes bedsores. And so if we could find a way to keep the telomeres from shortening, bedsores wouldn't occur. Now you can think of this example in every kind of disease you've ever heard of where there's cell division involved. Now it's also not just us, our pets, dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, deer, they've all been shown to age by telomere shortening. So we could actually be benefiting their health too if we could find a way to keep the telomeres from shortening. But the absolute best example of where telomere length affects aging is that there are people on this planet born with short telomeres, and these kids suffer from a disease called progeria, the disease of short telomeres. They have a life expectancy of about 20 years, and they die of all the same age-related ailments that we do. If we could find a way to prevent the telomere shortening, this could be a cure for this disease. And there's only 250 kids at any one time on this planet with this disease, but that would still be a very worthwhile thing to do. Okay, so this is what we're doing. How do we stop and reverse this clock? Well, it turns out we have cells in our body that already have figured that out. That's our reproductive cells. And this is important because if our reproductive cells had telomere shortening, our kids would be born with shorter chromosomes than we have. And their kids would be born with shorter chromosomes than they have. And we would have been extinct as a species a long time ago. Well, so our reproductive cells has figured out a way to prevent the telomere shortening, and they do that with an enzyme called Telomerase, which I led the research and the discovery of back in the mid-1990s. This enzyme actually adds bases. Remember I was talking about bases. Adds bases back onto the end of the chromosome. So every time a cell divides, the clock ticks once, and again it ticks again. But in our reproductive cells, when the clock ticks, telomerase pushes it back a tick. So that's what this enzyme does, and that's what I'm focused on, trying to use this enzyme. So it's only in our reproductive cells. How do we get this produced in all of our cells? Well, my company is my company is in Sierra Sciences. It's in Reno, Nevada. We're founded in 1999, and our mission is to lengthen telomeres in human cells to both reverse human aging and declining health. That's what we're doing. We have two different methods we're using. One is called telomerase gene delivery. We're going to deliver telomerase to all the cells of the body. And the other one's called telomerase gene induction, which I'll come back to. We already have a gene in our cells. We can induce that gene to start producing telomerase. This is our pictures of our lab. We have about 10,000 square feet of lab space totally devoted to just solving these problems, how to get telomerase produced in all of our cells. The gene delivery involves essentially taking the gene for telomerase, encapsulating it inside of a protein, and then, like a virus, kind of, it is then injected into a person, and this protein this gene encapsulated inside a protein will fuse with other cells and get inserted into the cells, just like two soap bubbles floating in the air will fuse and become one. This is one approach we're using. And remember what I told you about the Hayflick limit? Well, this is data that I'm going to show from our lab right now, that when we do this gene therapy technique on human cells, we abolish that Hayflick limit. So no longer do we get these cells leveling off at the Hayflick limit when we produce telomerase and keep telomeres long. Not only have we done that, but we've also reversed aging in human cells. We've reversed aging in human tissue, mostly skin grown on the back of a mouse. And colleagues at Harvard have now, using our technology, have reversed aging in mice. They've turned old mice into young mice. This lengthening of telomeres reversed aging in every way imaginable. It didn't just get more energy. Every way you can imagine about reversing aging, they saw in these mice and in these tissues in the cells. Nothing else, no matter what you've ever heard about aging, nothing else has succeeded at doing this. Only lengthening telomeres. And we have human clinical studies coming up really soon using this telomerase gene therapy on humans. Now, as I said, we already have the gene inside of our cells, so we don't necessarily have to deliver it to our cells. We have this gene producing telomerase. At least it produces it in our reproductive cells. This is the DNA shown as a gray bar. The blue thing is the gene producing telomerase. Next to every gene is a regulatory element. It's like a light switch that turns the gene on and off. Now, that's true in our reproductive cells. In all of the other cells of our body, there's a protein that's binding to this regulatory element and shutting it off. This protein's called a repressor. So what we are doing at my company is we are testing chemicals and natural products and looking for anything that will bind to that repressor, dislodge it, and allow the gene to turn back on again. This is pictures of high-throughput robots where we can test up to 4,000 different chemicals or natural products a day. And sometimes this thing is running day and night. And so far in our primary screening, which means that we are screening random chemicals, we've tested over 250,000 different chemicals at random to see if they can turn on this gene. We have found 900 so far that do so. We've been able to break these into 39 different families, and that allowed us to actually start doing something called medicinal chemistry, which now, instead of screening random samples, we could take everything we learned from these families that we've already discovered and start designing new molecules. And we've designed over 200,000 different chemicals so far. And through those testing, we have been able to increase the potency of doing this threefold. But we are still not there yet. We are about 3 to 8-fold lower than it will take to actually stop the aging process, or at least stop the telomere shortening. And if we can go higher than that, then we start reversing telomere shortening. We think that we can have such a drug or natural product in less than a year from now if our research continues on the pace that it has been. And very soon, I don't know if you know this person, this is Betty White. She's really famous in the United States. Very soon, I hope to be able to see somebody like Betty White go back, who's 94 now, go back to being 24. The cure for aging is in our telomeres. This is something I strongly believe. We just have to get done with the research to show it. And to learn more, I want to recommend you read my book called Curing Aging, which has been translated into South Korean, also translated into Japanese, and also Spanish and a few other countries. It's available in many different sources. There's also a movie about my research called The Immortalist. It also stars Aubrey de Grey, another anti-aging scientist. And this is a good way to learn about what's going on there too. So thank you very much. I guess we don't do questions until later. Thank you.